I like to show you the qualities of the materials because I feel that you can develop this skill a bit better, like how to treat these materials. Because when you look at the horse itself, like that's the material is pretty complex. There are tactics how you can show maybe hair, how we can render the hair or fur. And if we understand the basic form, we can much clearly see where the sun is coming from. I wanted to show you this concept with the strong shadow because it's a basic exercise to just see the different parts. We shouldn't understand all of the parts right away. Just the main light source is creating the center light. Usually the highlight is really weak, or for example, the strongest point is the blue highlight. And also why you see that the neck is a rounded form is because I placed this lighter area, and on the left we have a little bit darker. And it's basically the same concept. I feel that if it would be great to create a simple exercise like this, maybe just in I don't know, like 10 minutes, just to see like how we can create these. It's a continuation of the values what we studied earlier, because I feel that I'm using these tactics as a natural, it's in my brain somehow. And also like how I rendered the ears, I've placed the little bit of highlight or even the bush. So I've strategically placed the darker, even just one line, because I know that if I place a darker tone under the shape, that will giving the impression that it's a rounded form and it's grounded also. And I know this grounded concept is because I mentally think about this occlusion shadow. What is when you are holding close your hands or anything, you will see this dark line, and that's the occlusion shadow. In computer graphics, it's everyday stuff, like it's automatic. And that's why it's interesting when we paint a shape, or even if we would paint like a simple egg form, or how my fingers are touching the form is, you see that because we have this occlusion shadow where two surfaces are touching. So I would love to create a basic exercise like this, and then we can combine and play with more. I would like to work on a piece of paper and keep some space so it's not in the center. I'm using an A5 paper, and we can draw it. You can start with creating the basic shape. In this case, it's the exercise is for the shading itself. So I'm trying to use lighter strokes, so it's not too harsh, or I'm not pushing the pencil into the... Yeah, for the pencil, you can also play with adding more and playing with the removing. So with the eraser, especially for the reflected light, that's a great technique. I'm adding more and knowing that, okay, I will remove some. The core of this exercise is what I wanted to show you is this occlusion shadow where the objects are touching, because that's super, super important for every project, even if it's painting or drawing. And one other great tactic is to use the background, because in drawing we can have, of course, the outlines, but if we like to achieve a photographic effect, we like to avoid the outlines. Usually in, for example, watercolor style painting, it's okay to use ink as an outline and fill in the gaps. But if you like to create like a photographic effect, you like to avoid the harsh outlines. There are styles when they strategically paint the outlines, and that's also interesting. But generally, how we can show a form or lighter areas is to place something dark behind. And as I'm making darker and darker the background, this area pops even more forward. And how we treat these edges, that's where the real like artistry comes through, because even with the horse painting, for example, I knew that the highlight on the neck hair will be the strongest, or like that's a really important effect, what describes this material. And if we can choose one area to highlight, for example, in my case, where the outer edge of the sphere is, it could be really defined and hard. And if we compare to the imaginative, like if it would be like a rabbit or maybe a character with the fur, of course we like to have a blurry edge. With these decisions, we can make these statements like, I want to emphasize that it's a hard, a rigid ball, for example. If it's a glass, for example, that's also a great example. So we can play a lot with these qualities, like what is important. Usually, this is a simulated indoor lighting, where we have one light source and the sky is not really visible. So I assume that this is like an indoor scenario. And usually we paint outdoor subjects. I wanted to show you this other project I've worked on, because it might make it into context, like why these exercises could be interesting or important. Because if you have a complex shape, you can make this decision how you want the shading. These fire colors are also interesting because the life and how it's really similar how the skin works. And the skin is really special because where you see through a little bit, and the blood under the skin is showing through, and also the light is traveling through the surface, and it's creating a partly see-through effect. So in my case, I think it's creating this feeling like a skin. At some point, I painted a lot of these texture studies, and it's interesting to look back at these. I'd like to quickly show you some pages from this really old sketchbook to show the difference between only outlining and if you can make decision about only showing or only rendering parts of that form. Also in these, it was an interesting exercise when I did this. Illustrating something doesn't mean to render everything. So if in this case, for example, without color, it looks like it's the texture is showing through. So it's not easy. That's why I'm not a big fan of the only ink or only graphite, because with the paints we can fine-tune these nuances. Much easier for me to describe a material, for example. And this Terminator shadow, what is in some of these sketches, it's like a hard line, and that makes them look like shiny objects. And if you blur this line, that will make it softer. So that's also an interesting quality of these sketches. From now on, you will see an egg or an apple in the afternoon sun, and it will immediately like, ah, now I see it. From these, I don't know, like 5 or more years old sketchbooks, when I look at them and I see that, oh, now I understand what they meant.